Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape Podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we delve into U2's Stay Faraway So Close and ask, is it their greatest track? But first, it happened once, and so it'll be forever. The words of Bruno Ganz's character Daniel in Wim Wenders' 1987 classic film, Der Himmel über Berlin. Why, Stephen, I hear you ask, dear listener and dear viewer, are you quoting a classic 1980s German noir movie at the start of this week's podcast? Well, this week I thought we would discuss why U2's Stay Faraway So Close is their best song. Now, as always, a disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast, especially this one, we are very much a vibes podcast, and it is the start of the year, and you might be wondering, well, Stephen, why aren't you doing the top 10 acts? Top 10 acts to watch in 2025, the ones to watch. I'm going to be real with you. Most of those lists are bollocks. And I, having done them, know this. Because you can't predict the future. You'd be surprised to know. Also, just anytime I've ever done that, bands have either broken up, not released anything, or done nothing. So, not all, but a lot. So, there's no real point in me trying to crystal ball this and look into the year. No one can really tell. So I thought it'd be really interesting to hone in on a favourite song of mine. In fact, one of my favourite songs of all time, Stay Far Away So Close. So let us dive in, and also just a little bit of history on me and U2. I am a huge fan of U2. I went to see them in Twickenham as part of their Joshua Tree 30-year anniversary tour there back about, must be 8 or 9 years ago now at this point. I love their albums. I think Joshua Tree is their best album. Although I think Achtung Baby is a very close second. And I've loved their work from beginning to end, really. There's always something within a U2 album that I've loved, even the weaker albums, the more recent kind of stuff. But I've always kind of felt them to be, in my view, Ireland's greatest band in terms of, classic albums. Do you have a classic? They do. They have two of them at the very least. And I think in certain ways, The Unforgettable Fire would maybe be seen as a classic more if it wasn't for the fact that Joshua Tree was the immediate album after. And I think they are a great band and probably deserving of a bit more respect in Ireland and stuff like that. But these things sometimes happen where, opinions may vary, and you may not like U2 or you may love U2, but hopefully you'll dive into with me on this track as to why I think this is their greatest track, and thematically it is an incredibly deep one. So, released in November 1993, as part of their often overlooked record Zooropa, which also included Nom, Lemon, and the Johnny Cash song The Wanderer, which are all songs I really love. I think that is a record that is somewhat overlooked, almost seen as a kind of maybe a spiritual successor, go with me on this, to Rattle and Hum, in the way what Rattle and Hum was to the Joshua Tree, Zooropa was to Achtung Baby, kind of an album made on the road whilst they were touring Joshua Tree, an album made on the road while they were making Zoo TV, the incredible concert series, the one that would probably change the face of U2 in a lot of ways, and we'll dive into that kind of period for them as to why it changed things. But I always think Zooropa is an often overlooked album, and Stay Far Away So Close is the third single from it, and it would actually be nominated for Grammys and stuff like that, the Zooropa as well. I think the beginning of it really stems in, as I say, with a lot of Zooropa and a lot of pieces from it, and I think they say in Bono's autobiography, which I really enjoyed, although I thought very strong beginning, very strong middle, poor ending. I think the book delved a bit too far into the political aspect of his work. Kind of almost, I suppose he kind of says it in his own way, almost the band became, for a time, secondary to that. But I think, a lot of Zooropa has its roots in Achtung Baby, and that for Stay Far Away So Close. Originally started, the beginning of the writing was in 1991. Originally, like a few songs in rock history, it is said was written for Frank Sinatra. I believe the same can be said of David Bowie's Life on Mars, which again, when you listen to both songs, you're like, I cannot hear Frank Sinatra sing that. But it makes sense when you think of Bowie, when you think of Bono, when you think of them. Like Frank Sinatra would be such a legend, and as songwriters, to write a song sang by the great Frank Sinatra would be such a beautiful thing to happen. Now, what state the song was originally recorded in at that point, originally written and conceived in during the Achtung Baby sessions at Hansa Studios in Berlin. Berlin would become a theme, obviously, as we talk about Wim Wenders' movie, Der Himmel über Berlin, or Wings of Desire. The song kind of took shape first in Berlin, and I think that's really interesting that its spiritual home was there. Obviously, a lot of Zooropa was recorded in Windmill Lane Studios here in Dublin, and I think Westland Studios as well, a few other studios and bits. I think they were moving around, or they were finishing up at least a lot of it, so I don't know how much of it existed at that kind of time. But originally written for Frank Sinatra, I think the band had trouble with it. Musically, it is a beautiful song, and I love what comes out of Zooropa, the production that is done, and how they actually end up with the track, because it is beautifully, beautifully done. But it is interesting to think of it as a kind of a Frank Sinatra song. And I also believe Stay Far Away So Close is Bono's best vocal performance. I also would kind of put alongside that Red Hill Mining Town from Joshua Tree as well. But I think this is his strongest performance, as I say, the strongest song from them. It begins to take shape then for the band when Wim Wenders approaches the band looking for a song for his new upcoming movie, Faraway So Close, which itself is a sequel to his 1987 film Wings of Desire, or Der Himmel über Berlin, which starred the late great Bruno Ganz as an angel, overseeing West Berlin, I believe, with other angels and stuff like that, and acting as muses almost to people, and falls in love with a trapeze artist, and muses on what it is and to become human, what it is to want something that you cannot have, what it is to reassess one's life. And it's a beautiful, beautiful movie, entirely shot in black and white with great cinematography. Almost it has that German kind of sensibility to it, of expressionism, of the early expressionist German movie. So it's probably a neo-expressionist film. The film buffs among you may help me out with that one, whether or not they would see it that way, but it's very constructed like that. It's very much a considered auteur's piece, and it is quite an abstract story in a lot of ways, as you can imagine, anything dealing with angels and things like that. And Bruno Ganz's performance is absolutely beautiful in it, as his love is with this trapeze artist. It also features Nick Cave for a little bit. Nick Cave does there's an entire performance of From Her to Eternity, if I'm correct, or I'm not entirely crazy. I believe it's From Her to Eternity in the movie. So it has roots within rock music as well. And the trapeze artist goes to see and the movie, and obviously the movie has relations to what Germany was like at the time, very much bifurcated by the East and West German governments, and the Berlin Wall, which features so heavily in it. Peter Falk also appears in the movie himself as Peter Falk, who alludes to the fact that he may have at one point being an angel himself. Anyway, we kind of have diverged into the film itself, but it is an incredible movie, and the mood and tone of that original 1987 film is very important, because it will play into what U2 come up with. So obviously they agree to making a song for this, and I think Bono talks about how those themes, the themes of being an angel, the themes of love, the themes of eternity, the themes of wanting something that you cannot have, are feeling lost within multiple voices, I should say. Actually, in the movie, a huge theme of it is that the angels themselves can read people's minds and hear people's thoughts, and a lot of the soundscape of it is actually people's innermost thoughts, which makes the movie very interesting. You kind of get these shots of people contemplating thought, and in some scenes quite disturbing in ways. It's quite violent in ways, it's quite expressionistic in other ways, nihilistic in others, and it's the human experience, and it's a beautiful movie for that. But that plays its way into what the band would do with the song. And I think when you think about those themes, and it would obviously go on to be a part of the soundtrack for Faraway So Close, albeit in a slightly different guise, with different recording of it, far more rhythmical. Faraway So Close is nowhere near the movie, in my opinion, that Der Himmel Über Berlin or Wings of Desire is. You might also, if this all sounds incredibly familiar, remember there was a film called City of Angels with Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan, which is, I believe it's just the American version of Wings of Desire. I think they're pretty open about that. But again, nowhere near. As great as Nicolas Cage is, and I do love him as an actor, it doesn't really go where it should. Now, so interestingly, the song itself, let's talk about the track. What I love and I've always loved about that track and that period of time from U2, especially in Achtung Baby, and I think as well in Zooropa, is the way that it plays with the digital and the analog. We're at that point in time, we're in the early 90s. Obviously the Berlin Wall, they were in Germany at the beginning. I think the Berlin Wall was either about to fall when they landed in Germany, I believe, or when they were recording Achtung Baby. But certainly at the time they were in Hansa Studios, and that kind of feeling of the bifurcated Germany and the unification of Germany was in the air, and Berlin itself was changing as a city. And the world was changing. We were moving from what was an analog world of the 80s, an analog world prior to that, into the digital age, into 24-hour, TV stations, 24-hour news. The world was getting somewhat smaller, which you can kind of see in the unification of Germany in that sense, that the world was becoming smaller. The European Union, which plays, I believe, in the artwork for Zooropa. There is the European Union flag is somewhere in there, if I'm correct. And Achtung Baby is a great example of that. The album kind of feels like there's a lot of effects, there's a lot of processing going on. There's, The Fly is a really great, I think The Fly is a great encapsulation of that idea of how small the world has become and how quick and how overpowering it is, and a natural progression from the Reagan era Joshua Tree, which was very critical of that government. We're into the Bush era, and the world as well is, as I say, becomes smaller. There's all these TV stations going on, and Zoo TV, the tour that would follow Achtung Baby, which is an amazing tour. You can see the Live at Sydney performances on that, and just that plays into the digital age, the TV age, the satellite age. Obviously the phone calls from the character Mephisto, the Fly character, and again, U2 are always were quite political, are quite thematic in their writing, becoming more so. Why Stay Far Away So Close, I think for me, stands out more than, let's say, a One or With or Without You, which would be their more balladeer type songs, is that undercurrent within it, the texture beneath the instrumentation, the production that was done by Brian Eno, The Edge and Flood, is just, resonates with that kind of buzzing, almost kind of like, it feels so, as I say, it feels so textural, it feels so within the time, within that kind of that fuzz of change, that change from the analog to the digital, and it resonates right through. It's that great thing that The Edge is, and I believe it's The Edge whose work that is on the kind of that, I believe the Ebo guitar, the endless guitar, I think that was what Eno called it. And having Brian Eno and Flood, obviously, who would go on to become more of U2's producer, I believe, on Pop, and a few other records as well, taking over from the incredibly successful Eno Lanois combination, who would obviously return. But the production of the song has that kind of fuzz. It has that sense of otherworldliness. That again, the kind of the feeling of the angels and the ethereal, but within an incredibly grounded, expressionistic, abstract way, and very much in the way that Der Himmel über Berlin does. And it is a beautiful, beautiful sound. It's one of those things where I think about With or Without You, and I think of this song, and I think I could listen to the backing track of that on a loop. I think the playing as well, as always, I think with U2, especially in this era where they're very much at home with their sound. And we talked a little bit about how much they had changed from Joshua Tree to Achtung Baby when I was talking about the Fontaines of it all. But that huge change is massive, and you also see that in the work of Anton Corbijn, who is the photographer with them, but also the sound, obviously, Joshua Tree to Achtung Baby. I don't think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, or you can think of another artist. I think David Bowie is probably the biggest one for this, but such a massive change from an incredibly successful album to another successful album within a very short period of time. I think there's very few bands that do that. I don't think there's any band that did a sharper turn as that, especially in an album that is as successful as Joshua Tree. Like the implication, I know Rattle and Hum kind of rests in between, but to take a formula that, you know, other bands would have gone, just do it again, and go, no, you know, they're going to go dream it up and dream it up all over again, as he says at the end of that gig, is an incredibly brave thing. And if you ever watch From the Sky Down, the incredible documentary on the making of Achtung Baby, and they definitely feel that. And that feeling of Hansa Studios, although not being the last place to stay, Faraway So Close, is written or recorded in, very much feels like that Berlin at the turn of at the end of the 20th century, the, you know, unification of Germany really plays a part in it. And the sound of the band as well. There is this feeling that they have honed in on something that they were always quite good at, but really comes to play when they're playing within the production, which is the simple done right, done effectively, and done at the correct time. Bono's vocal on it, along with, as I say, the textural aspect, and obviously Adam Clayton's bass playing and the edge and his instrumentation, and obviously he has a part to play in the production of it as well. And obviously Larry Mullen's drumming, which again is so incredibly tasteful. And his great strength is finding drum beats that are tasteful, that are right for the part, but do not overbear the part. It was interesting, I was only watching Drumeo, which is an incredible YouTube video series. I'm sure you're aware of it. You've probably seen those things where they get like incredible drummers to play other people's tracks and stuff. But they did a really beautiful interview with Phil Collins, who I'm also a massive fan of. And I'd love to talk a little bit about Phil Collins, because he is himself an overlooked drummer, I think, at times. And it does play, their series does really go into that. And he's talking to his son, and he's talking to the guys who run Drumeo, and he's sitting behind a drum kit and stuff. And he talks about serving the song and just doing what was right for the song at the time, and not, you know, going in and being like, it's, you know, here's my part kind of type thing. And it makes sense of being in Genesis with so many great songwriters. Obviously the great Peter Gabriel as well during his period of it. But I digress. Larry Mullen's drumming is amazing. But Bono's vocal in this is absolutely soaring. It's absolutely incredible. And embodying, and I think there's something to be said about getting the influence of obviously going, okay, this is you know, we want to write this song for Frank Sinatra, and I'm sure that plays into it, kind of that feeling plays into it. But Bono's vocal here really embodies the lyrics and embodies the theme, and I think embodies the feeling of Bruno Ganz's character in Wings of Desire. This loneliness, this endlessness, this eternity, this kind of feeling of fantasy and reality, and what is dream and what is real. And the lyrics themselves do play into that. What is happening? Who is the narrator? Who is the narrator speaking to? Is the narrator the angel? Is that the person who's observing this? It also contains some incredibly great lines delivered, again, with Bono's brilliant vocal. Dressed up like a car crash, your wheels are turning, but you're upside down, which I think is the most incredible description of a person. You know, you're dressed up like a car crash, your wheels are turning, but you're upside down. And it's just, again, we were talking about that like twist of line when we were talking about Shane MacGowan and the Pogues. Bono, again, is one of those lyricists where he just writes these lines which are just so evocative and brilliant that you're just like, that makes so beautiful and poetic, especially just during this period. And I think, you know, while Zooropa is the overlooked album, Achtung Baby is amazing, I think this is really U2 at their zenith for me. You know, going into the Zoo TV of it all. I think pop that would follow everything is a glorious failure. I think they admit that it was rushed. It was probably more style over substance. They were trying something, and it was probably the nadir of the Achtung Baby sound, as it were, whereas this is the zenith of it. And yeah, dressed up like a car crash, your wheels are turning but you're upside down. And also that lyric, up with the static and the radio, which I think plays into that idea of you could lip sync to the talk shows. You know, that kind of idea of endless television, you know, 24 channels and nothing on, how that affects people, how that loneliness can be somewhat subdued by the sound of the radio or the sound of static or the sound of the television, how people were kind of, and that plays into the movie as well. Bono as a vocalist and as a showman, having seen him live as well, you don't have that ability, you don't have that power without being incredibly great at your craft. And you can tell that, that this song especially is really where he can, the ability to give that huge note, especially during the choruses, on the stay, on the stay part of it, just really plays so beautifully into his voice and into his register. I believe in the recording of this, and I don't know if I could find anything that really says this is how it was done, but that he would record these vocals, and I think this is a Brian Eno production thing, but he would record the vocals with the sound turned up on the speakers in the control room. Which meant very hard for engineers. Any sound engineers listening to that might be like, "Ugh." And I think Brian Eno admits that, yes, it is not the perfect way to get the perfect clean vocal, but it is the perfect way to get the perfect performance. And I think that really plays into it, because when you have a great band like U2, Larry Mullen, Clayton and The Edge, and I think unfairly Clayton gets kind of bashed around by people, but again, it's like the perfect part for the perfect song. You might be Jaco Pastorius, but if you can't, lock down on a track, what good is it? I think another Drumeo example of that, I saw Stuart Copeland playing Limp Bizkit, and I was like, I get it. I get what you're doing. I get that you're an incredible drummer, but, but anyway, that performance and that vocal, I think, is where the heart of the song lies. And and those lyrics is what tie it to it. Now, the lyrics as well have themes of abuse in it. You say that he hits you, you feel more alive. Oh no, is that what it is? And that kind of, again, who is the narrator? Who is saying this to the central character, who he's speaking to? Who is this person? And this person who seems so incredibly lost, going to get cigarettes, but you don't smoke, and that feeling. And something that I can very much, kind of relate to myself. So I think, it captures the lostness, the eternity, and the fear that is in that song, the lament and the melancholy. It is a song of infinite melancholy and beauty, and I think all of those aspects and the production, and that this is them at their best, really make this, for me, their best song. And that's really, I know Where the Streets Have No Name, One, Mysterious Ways, Red Hill Mining Town, as I say, is one of my favorite songs. Bullet the Blue Sky, The Unforgettable Fire, all of these great tracks that are, beautiful in their own way, and are by all means, if I was to do a top 5 U2 songs, they would have very much a home in it. But there's something about thematically, the mood of it, the sound of it, how it captures the movie, and the influence of it, that really resonates with me when it comes to Stay Far Away So Close. And it's not an unknown U2 song. It appears in their best ofs. They only recently did a remaster of it where they did kind of a lyric video. And I should also shout out the music video, which itself was directed by Wim Wenders, which itself is actual beautiful work of art as well in terms of its production and its cinematography. And it places the band as muse-like angel characters to a group of people performing the songs, and how beautiful that is. And especially when shot in the style Wim Wenders was in when he made Der Himmel über Berlin, in that black and white way. The camera is very flowy. It moves. It embodies that angel-like, ethereal, bodiless character, spiritual character throughout. And again, these are the things that make it. It's the external. You even saw that in Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar recently. It's like music videos can play such an important part in the perception of a song as well, because it can play into the thematic and tonal structure and resonance of a track, especially for someone like me. The song would live in live. Unfortunately, they did not perform it live the time I went to see them. It is dipped in and out. As far as I can tell from their live performances, there is a perfectly beautiful... Now, they strip it back. I'm yet to see a version where they really go for trying for the studio sound of it. I think it's because it is so locked in with the textural undercurrent of it that they have not gone for that version of it live. But they do these stripped back versions, and there's one from 1993 live in Sydney, which I don't believe is on the U2 channel, but you can see it online if you want to, and it's a beautiful version of it. Bono is very much the slick back hair and in the leather jacket. He's very much in that world of The Fly, and you can see the sweat and everything. It really, really works. And I think it's the best live performance I've seen of it. I also know that they did an Elevation one from 2001, which is on their channel and is a perfectly good performance as well, stripped back as well. But I think the other version, because it lives within the time the song was released in 1993 or around that time, it is a lot. It has a lot of beauty to it. I believe at the start of it he says something like, Wim Wenders stole this from the Beatles and we're stealing it back, which is a callback to them on Rattle and Hum, saying Charles Manson stole this song from the Beatles, we're stealing it back, and they hit into Helter Skelter. So it is a beautiful song from one of the greatest bands of all time, who have a back catalogue of songs that could all be considered their best. And there's a list as long as my arm. I think the song resonates to me because there's an emotional resonance to me within it. There's a thematic resonance to me within it. I think the production is a great meeting of Eno, Flood and The Edge. I think Zooropa itself is an overlooked album. I think its way it approaches the digital and the analog world is in itself quite beautiful in its way and its presentation. And I think as an album, or as a song as well, and as an album, it fits so brilliantly and so greatly into the music. So I think it is one of the best U2 songs of all time. But what do you think? Is Stay Far Away So Close U2's best song? What is, in your view, their best song? Do you like U2 at all? Do you agree with the song? Have you seen Der Himmel über Berlin? Am I pronouncing that right if you're a German listener or viewer? I don't know. But please let me know in the comments below. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and watching the Last Mixtape podcast here on YouTube, Spotify, and indeed on Apple. If you could like, comment, subscribe, and share the podcast to help it grow, I would be eternally grateful. You can also share your music with me to Stephen@thelastmixtape.com, and maybe the Count of Monty Playlisto, who will return when new music is released, will have a listen and delve into it and come back with it on the playlist. But for now, that was the Last Mixtape podcast. I was Stephen White. You were the listener and the viewer. Hey, so long.